Well, hello. Today I want to talk to you about writing on a typewriter. Now, previously I did a video where I showed you a typewriter that's been out of my basement for a while. Some of the keys were sticky, it wasn't in the best shape, and there was a lot I didn't know about it. But in the time since then, I've gotten to know this machine very well. I've unstuck the keys, I've done some cleaning, and I found out it's actually kind of fun to write on a typewriter. So this is more about the actual writing than it is about the typewriter itself. I typed 10 pages, so I'm going to use some footage from my typing the 10 pages to break the video up. I will release the video footage of the actual typing, although the battery quit at about 3 pages. The battery in the camera, not in the typewriter, because the typewriter doesn't have one, but the battery did quit in the camera at about 3 pages, because apparently after 28 minutes I didn't have enough battery left. So I will release that as, I don't know, do you call that ASMR? Anyway, I'll release that probably Saturday, after this video, so hopefully you don't mind that this fills in as a pens in use this week. I know I've been lax in the pens in use. I've had 2 projects going and one trip to Dickinson I wasn't planning to take. So pens in use just didn't happen, but it'll be back. Anyway, so hope you enjoy this, and you'll be able to find the actual typed text at the link down below in the video description. So let's enjoy I'm going to show driving footage because I'm pretty much reading an essay, so we'll be going kind of East River Road, Badlands area, so hope you enjoy. Well, hello. As I talk about typewriters, we're just going to wander a couple of the roads south of Medora in the Badlands. One of them's the East River Road, and we'll go through Logging Camp Ranch area. I need my glasses because I can't read this thing.
A few minutes later.
So a lot of this channel is related to writing. I spend a lot of time focusing on one writing tool, the fountain pen. I also make nods to paper and ink. And I do the occasional long-form essay when I film a driving video, which this sort of is. We are writers. We are not afraid of ideas, even ideas that we disagree with. So in this video, I want to talk about another writing tool, the mechanical typewriter. The machine you are seeing in this video is the Smith Corona Silent Super. This particular machine was released into the world in 1956. Now, I don't know its history, like a lot of the vintage fountain pens I own. I do know that it was either decently cared for or perhaps little used. The purchase of such a machine in 1956 would have been equivalent to buying a high-end laptop today. So it's not a purchase you make lightly. By the way, I've had the chance to use a 21st century mechanical typewriter. I spent the whole 2 lines of using it absolutely terrified that I was going to break it. They don't make them like they used to, and in this case that's a real shame. But to be fair, how many people would pay the price of a high-end laptop for a machine that only types? So I bought this machine when I was in college or possibly late in high school. I'm honestly no longer sure which. I found it at a flea market or junk shop, but it was in Wellsboro, Pennsylvania. I don't know why I bought it, except that the price was about $20. And I do like old things. I've always been that way. I didn't need it. In college, I had been in the first class back in fall of 1994 to have a laptop. We were an early one-to-one school. Someday I'll have to talk to you about that machine and its specs, but not in this video. Suffice to say it was good enough by the standards of the day, and it certainly did a lot more than a manual typewriter. Now going back in time, I had, at that time I still owned, an electronic typewriter that I had purchased fairly early in high school. It used a daisy wheel, carbon ribbon, and it had lift-off correction tape. It was a nice little machine, and I typed a lot on it till I got that laptop in college. I later gave it to my mother, who also no longer uses it. So I've been a writer for a long time. We can talk about what I write some other time. But this writing is what got me into fountain pens originally. In late elementary school, I had actually purchased a Smith Corona electric machine that looked a lot like this Silent Super. It had the same kind of keys, and I had to use the carriage return arm. And, just to be awkward, it used a script typeface. I can't imagine spending a fortune on a typewriter with such a specialized typeface. But when I bought it, I paid whatever it is a kid can pay to a neighbor for a used machine that was several decades old. And after a yard sale where she couldn't sell it. I did do a lot of typing on that machine despite its limitations. So I want to let you in on a dirty little secret about handwriting. It's slow. What I loved about the typewriter was that it was faster than handwriting. I also did a lot of typing on our family's TI-99 4A. It came with a word processor called Typewriter. There were a lot of compromises in it, but it was good for me. The keyboard of that machine was somewhat physical. We'll get there. And I could print everything on our dot matrix printer. I don't recall the fate of that old Smith Corona electric, but I did replace it for a while with that old TI. However, in high school, a lot of teachers had a rule that you could not turn in any papers printed on a dot matrix printer. And if you look at the quality of text on some of those machines, you can see why. The result was I ended up purchasing the daisy wheel typewriter at the Kmart in Olean, New York. And I discovered that I preferred the experience of typing on a typewriter. When I got my laptop in college, its keyboard was disappointing. Certainly I used it and composed on it, but something was missing. And I didn't have the experience and so on then to understand what was missing. So let's admit something about my writing. My basement is filled with a lot of my own writing. There are handwritten notebooks, papers from the typewriters, and paper printed from various computers. Although a lot of what I did on the computers was saved electronically and is no longer accessible. I wasn't happy typing on a computer. I could handwrite a first draft and then we're done. I never seemed to make the leap from putting the text in I never seemed to make the leap to putting the text into the typed form. And I didn't understand why. I always had good intentions, but it just never happened. So let's come back to this old Smith Corona Silent Super that I purchased some 30 years ago. I bought the machine, but then I didn't use it much. However, for some reason I chose to move it to North Dakota. In my first year of teaching, I did find a use for it. I had to turn in my lesson plans on a specific carbon copy form. So I used this typewriter to fill out that form to create those lesson plans. But that was all that I ever did with it. After I figured out how to use my laptop and a spreadsheet to form my lesson plans to fit, I never looked back. So this typewriter languished. This typewriter continued to languish through several moves. It languished in basements or in the backs of closets. And it might still be there today, except that something unexpected happened. In 2020, the world suddenly became a lot smaller as the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Suddenly we were all living on screens. I was teaching on screens, socializing on screens, and I was supposed to relax on screens with YouTube or movies. So I pulled this typewriter out of my basement. Now I did make a video a while back where I showed it off. It's linked down below. You can watch it for all the stuck keys and for all the features of the machine that I was unaware of, and I had a lot to learn then. This machine never did make it back to the basement. At first, I would only use the machine sporadically. But I could sit at the couch, put the machine on a folding dinner tray. I have these nice set of 4 folding wooden dinner trays, and I could type. Or I could move it over here to my desk. Or I could sit at my kitchen table. The machine did improve with use. The keys got looser. 2 still stick a little. They're not ones I use very often. And I did some cleaning. It turns out that this machine is incredibly responsive. At the moment, I have hundreds of pages around the living room that were created on this machine. Most days I create multiple pages on it. So what is the special magic in the typewriter? First, I think it operates at close to the speed of thought. Handwriting is slow. Typing is so much faster. And I do know how to type roughly correctly, as you can see in my B-roll footage for this video. Again, filmed on the first 3 pages of this script. Another strength of the typewriter is the incredible feedback. A few years ago, I brought some dead computers back to life to create a Linux thin client lab in my classroom. Now, let's not get into the technical side of that. The part of that that's important to this video is that some of the old devices I resurrected had old IBM keyboards that were incredibly clicky. They were really satisfying to use. I mean, annoying in a classroom with several of them going, but satisfying. It wasn't until the pandemic and bringing this old typewriter out of the basement that I finally started to understand. I find that I can be at my most creative when I am engaged in something physical. Before I wrecked my knee, I used to run. The physical act of running distracted just enough of my brain that I found it suddenly running on its own. My brain would free associate and come up with new ideas without me even realizing what was happening. Fortunately, milder activities work as well. I can walk, as long as the walk is physical enough. It also happens when I'm weeding the garden, painting the house, or cleaning. It seems that a mild physical task is enough to bring on this state of mind. And the physical act of typing on a mechanical typewriter seems to work that magic. Your muscle provides all the power in the mechanical typewriter. Sure, there's springs all over the place and a fancy drawstring that keeps the carriage moving, but you push the keys in quite a distance, and it takes some muscle. The reason I only filmed 3 pages today is that I had already been typing. My left hand got a bit sore. And, to be honest, the overhead camera's battery went dead. The computer world is aware of this powerful trait of a mechanical keyboard. Remember those clicky keyboards from IBM that I mentioned earlier? Those are now marketed as computer keyboards. They're marketed as being clicky and tactile and requiring quite a deep press. Some are even sold that look like old mechanical typewriter keyboards, sometimes with fancy LED backlighting. The Astra House company sells a modern typewriter that uses a mechanical keyboard with an e-ink screen. The keyboard and distraction-free environment are supposed to be its strengths. So allow me to digress for a minute. I don't need a distraction-free environment. If I don't want to get work done, I have all kinds of ways to distract myself that don't require notifications or the internet. A popular one with me is cleaning. So the typewriter doesn't help me that way. Yeah, but if it helps you, go nuts. I've often talked on this channel about how certain pens can disappear in my hand. The Lamy 2000 or the Pilot Custom 823 are two pens that allow me to write and never once think about the pen I'm using. I just happily write away. When I come up for air, I'm usually surprised by how many pages I've written. A manual typewriter works the same for me. I'll forget about the actual physical aspect of typing. I just find myself typing. And pages are created. Well, that's the power of the manual typewriter. And as I said, the distraction is in some ways a part of the flow, both as enemy and as a friend. It exists on our laptops in a lot of forms. I have never liked the 1 to 2 millimeter depress of a laptop keyboard. I really love the feel of a mechanical keyboard, but the manual typewriter is even better. It distracts me with its physicality just enough to free up my mind. By the way, side note again, on your laptop or cell phone, don't ever fall into the trap of turning on notifications. Those little monsters intrude in all the wrong moments. You're constantly interrupted by the latest meaningless take from Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And on some devices, you have to actually dismiss them, or they prevent you from doing your work until you acknowledge them. But back on topic, I have wondered if this love of a manual typewriter is a generational thing. I'm Generation X. That means I grew up in that generation when computers were just entering people's lives. It was before the internet. I've read that mine was the last generation to grow up without online access. And I grew up when a typewriter, manual or otherwise, was not a novelty. Older people love to assume that the young are ignorant of what they knew. But, why yes, in response to one of my colleagues, I do know what a ditto was. I do know about typewriters. I grew up with a rotary dial phone. I used a card catalog, and more. But let me tell you just for a minute about the high school secretary where I teach. I teach in a K-12 building with around 500 students, in a school district larger than the state of Rhode Island. No big whoop. Our high school secretary is a magnet to the little kids, especially the ones who are teachers' kids. The other ones use a different entrance and probably don't even know she exists. And one of her attractions is the daisy wheel electronic typewriter on her desk. The kids just respond to it automatically. They feel that instinctive power at seeing their thoughts immediately transformed into typed text. Put a kid in front of an iPad or cell phone and sure they get distracted. But they also have a lot of fun using a manual typewriter. I know this isn't science, but I think it illustrates the power of a typewriter in a way that spans generations. This humble tool helps us communicate. And sure, for some the novelty quickly wears off. But for how many others would the machine actually help them? And that does bring up another point. Everything about a typewriter is real. I mentioned the computer that I grew up with. One thing I quickly discovered on that computer was that the games on it were very unsatisfying. They weren't real. I didn't feel rewarded by working through the levels. I got to the end, I'm like, what do I have to show for that? And I think I feel the same about anything I create on the computer. It's not real until I have a physical product. Pixels on a screen are not real. And the typewriter makes it real in an instant. So let's talk about another value. I provided a link in the video description of this script that I'm reading right now. All of my typos are there. I can't fix them on the typewriter. At most, I might X them out or type over them. That's the same thing with my fountain pens. When we create a rough draft, we should be thinking about the message we want to get out, not the exact words we want to use, not our spelling, not our typos, our grammar mistakes, or even getting the perfect phrasing. Get it out and edit later. I know, because I'm a high school teacher, I know what they want to do is turn in their rough draft, but there's a reason we have a rough draft and then we make more drafts and we edit. The typewriter is a powerful drafting machine. And it is the 21st century. I took pictures of these pages, but I could just as easily have used optical character recognition, OCR, to move these rough drafts onto the computer. Or do as I'm discovering and do a second draft on the typewriter as well after you mark up the first draft. That's what happened with this essay. So the typewriter is not a Luddite device. It's a powerful device, and there are a lot of them out there, still at decent prices. And, if you don't like having to hammer at those mechanical keys, there's a lot of electric ones out there too. Just be careful with the electric and electronic world, because some of them use proprietary cartridges that are hard to find now. So I strongly suggest trying out a manual typewriter. Just don't buy one of the new ones. They're terrible, except for the occasional tiny typing project. There are a lot of manual typewriters out there languishing in basements or in schools or in junk shops that can be had for a song. They may need a little cleaning, maybe a little more work, but then they become a great writing companion. For the more technically minded, you may find that a typewriter is a good repair experience. I know that I enjoy repairing fountain pens. And one of the other reasons I haven't gotten pens in use lately, I have a mechanical distraction, a typewriter on my workbench that I'm trying to restore. And I hope that the restoration of the typewriter can both be subjects of a future video. But the typewriter is really a nice machine for putting words on paper. It works at the speed of thought. It is tactile in all the best ways. It is distraction-free. And it is easily converted to computer text, which is important in this world. It's a powerful drafting machine, but you probably want to use a computer to edit. The technological world has paid attention to the power of the typewriter. Our mechanical keyboards, the Astor House products, and all the typing apps that have a typewriter mode or which actually mimic the experience of typing on a typewriter show us that this technology is not dead. If you're worried about the keyboard, again, there are surviving electric or electronic typewriters. They still have a good keyboard feel, and they also give that good immediate feedback. The IBM Selectric is actually a wonderful machine, very heavy, wonderful machine, that allows you to quickly change typeface. And the machine even allows you to use printed type balls from a 3D printer, which is definitely a fusion of old and new. In the end, write and create in whatever ways that you feel best. The main thing is to create. I use fountain pens, typewriters, and more. My big satisfaction comes from the actual act of creation. And sure, I enjoy some of the tools. Before my eyes needed reading glasses, I enjoyed repairing pens. More of that coming now that I realized reading glasses help. The typewriter is another great tool. Maybe you do like the computer keyboard, that 1mm depress of a key. It doesn't matter. No matter what tool you use, I want you to share your creations with the world. So that was the whole idea of writing with a typewriter. I like a fountain pen, to fit it in my workflow as more of a note taker, sketcher, that kind of things. The typewriter is more of a composer, and the computer is my editor. So we'll have to talk about all those pieces of it later. So anyway, I want to thank you for watching. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.